Um, I finally beat Darkest Dungeon 2. And boy, yeah, it as a game that punishes you and kicks your ass and drags you through it, it
Hmm.
is it is so satisfying.
That's a good last boss.
Oh, that last boss is awesome.
It has
I
maybe
remember
my
when you
favorite name of anything.
yeah. Yeah, I remember you said you looked it up beforehand, and I was like, okay, yeah, I
And
might have said,
it made me want to go back to Darkest Dungeon
oh.
2.
And did you get into the mechanics of how it works?
No,
Like,
no, I never went back.
okay,
I
so
just said I wanted to.
okay, um, I would like to talk about it, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody who doesn't want to be spoiled, right? If you could if you care about it or not, but like, so yeah, I'm gonna talk about Darkest Dungeon 2 Final Boss, which is the fucking best part of the game in my opinion, for a little bit here. Tune out if you don't want to hear that. Um, okay, so the entire build up to that boss is you're playing through. In the first game, you're hearing about the ancestor, right? And you're hearing
Hmm.
about, um, in time you will truly know the extent of my failings, right? You're learning about everything that he did and all the occult shit and how badly that fucked up the Hamlet and how you have to go stop it, right?
Hmm.
Darkest Dungeon 2 is damn, we couldn't stop it. The world is fucked, right?
Oop.
There's very little hope left, and all we can do is carry it in the form of this flame from inn to inn and make our way to like the source of this evil. And you essentially are playing. You're trying to stop the ancestor's apprentice, who's like the person who he's talking to, essentially, almost like the player character went down this road of full on Lovecraftian bullshit and never turned back from it. So each chapter is kind of named after the flaws and the tragedies of going too far and every step of the way, and your ambition and so on. And with each one, you get this great narrative. And then so the final chapter is cowardice, you know, and
Mm.
every enemy starts getting affected by the that in certain ways. So like cowardice puts in a thing where there's certain enemies where when you hit them, you get shifted back multiple rows and stuff. It's cool how they work that theme in just a little bit, but yeah, the final boss at the mountain is your body of work, right?
The
And
academic's final like thesis essentially.
you have to take on each element of it as you go up the body, mind you, and then you get to the throne. And the way the thing I've been talking about in this game that really stands out so far, and it's really a highlight, is every class gets a backstory of how they got there, right? And you get to go into a 5 chapter, either playable or just monologue for each character when you get to a shrine of reflection, and it gives you a little bit of their backstory, and then you get access to more moves so that you can choose from a full build, and the move versatility changes up the way you play drastically, right? So it's humongous. They're big rewards for going to those things. It feels great because the story is rewarding, the reward is rewarding, and it permanently unlocks a thing that makes your character better. So you're like fucking beeline it for those as soon as you
Hmm.
can. In each one, they're kind of like interesting puzzle ways to play the game. Instead of the traditional combat system, you find ways to solve whatever the problem is, right? So if you're doing, let's say, the Plague Doctor, Paracelsus is uh, has the battle system of Darkest Dungeon, except you're in a classroom and the teacher is giving off a lecture, and you have to study your notes. And every time the lecture goes off, you kind of build up stress because you're like, he's wrong, and I'm going to prove it. But if you speak up too soon, you take damage. He goes, sit down, so you have to kind of wait for the right moment for the conclusion, and then you rebuttal, and then that'll do
You're
some
full of fucking
damage.
shit, professor. And then the
And
professor's like,
goes,
oh, oh,
oh, and
fuck.
everyone in the class goes, oh, and then you do that enough, and he's coughing up blood because he's also sickly, and like, so you have little things like that where they use the system in these plot oriented ways. It's awesome. When you eventually go through the 5 chapters with each character, you usually end up overcoming a character, a figure, a person, whatever their past trauma was kind of caused by, you know. And when when you're finally facing down the academic, after fighting a bunch of ads off, there's an attack it does called Face Your Failures, and you have to pick one of your characters in your party, and whoever you choose, their haunted ghost from their past will appear to basically thwart them, and they're the only one that can attack that enemy. They're the only one that can deal with it, and whatever row they're in, they're kind of like forced to confront this, while the rest of the party has to handle the situation more or less without them in a way. It's so fucking good, right? And as you do it, the whole time you're debuffed. Everyone in certain rows has, your healer might not have the ability to heal, your ranged attack might not be, your ranged fighter might not be able to do that, and so on. And you face your failure, you take it on, and once you defeat the ghost of the past, you have a moment of like, they have a line that is kind of like emblematic of something about them, you know. So the highwayman defeats like the you know, the guards chasing him and stuff, and he's like, and then you get a moment of reflection, and he's like, what if I miss? And then you get to take a shot at the academic, and that shot does 200 fucking damage of his 1,000 bar life, you know. And that's how you do real damage to it. And then the highwayman and the rest of that fight is fucking amped and ready to go, debuffs off, you know. And the momentum goes that way for your party the whole time, and it's like, and it's also just surrounded by the music and the moves, and everything going on is culminating. It's bombastic and fucking wonderful, man. I'm so happy that like the end of this game I already loved was so much cooler than I fucking thought, you know?
So now that you've defeated fucking Darkest Dungeon 2, you've done everything that it has to offer, and you've beaten the academic.
Technically no, but...
Well, okay, you've beaten the academic.
I haven't, yeah, there's more to unlock. Yeah.
How do you feel about that stagecoach system? Because, like, this is a really good, like, callback to what I was talking about, Bomb Rush Cyberpunk.
Yep.
In that, like, every time I fucking sat down to play Darkest Dungeon 2, like, there's ways to, like, oh, I'll auto-run it or I'll whatever. But, like, every time the coach starts up, I'm like, this shouldn't be, this sucks! Just go to the next fucking thing! Oh!
Yeah, the first time, you can go back, the first time I played this thing, that coach was the worst. And you really have to control it with your keyboard and just navigate a track, and it was not good, and it still isn't great. But like I said last time, I am now officially taking the update they made to it as a set it and forget it system, where there are objects you can pick up on the road, and they're going to be like consumables, combat items, in items. You'll pick up items on the road, you know, but you can completely ignore them.
Dude, like, I'm just thinking of like if I was like a game reviewer, if that was my thing instead of streaming, like everyone would just be so mad. All the Darkest Dungeon 2, of a great follow up to existing classic, 9 out of 10, -2 due to Stagecoach 7 final score.
So the Stagecoach, they minimized its presence as much as possible without completely removing it. And I think that even if they wanted it to, let's say, never give you any like obstacles to weave into to pick up things or whatever, there's an aspect of the game that is traveling in the Stagecoach diminishes your light and gives you healing over time. And there are other items that you can pick up where the travel of the Stagecoach affects something over time. So they could just make it instantly do those things, I suppose, and then
they sure could.
The next location. Yeah. But like it feels like the easier solution was because they wanted the travel to be implemented into stress management, light management, health management, and then the attachments on the coach. They're making it so that it's like you still have it play out as you travel, but it's not going to be something you have to actually actively pay attention to or swerve into or out of anymore. So every time I get at the location, I pick left, right, or center, whatever, and then it just starts moving. And then I just, you know, if I feel like it, I'll steer the mouse around, you know, to a little bit, or I'll just ignore it entirely. And you can go into the settings and there's 2 toggles for the sensitivity of the swerve and the dead angle of like when it stops. So like even if you think it's too overly sensitive, it even lets you fine tune that to some degree. So it's like it's become really, really forgettable. Like it's not a big deal.
I think the funniest thing is that I'm like, hey man, how do you feel about that? And you're giving essentially the same answer you gave last time, just you had more time in the game. And your answer is, well, it's not that bad once I learned to completely ignore it.
Well, they ignored it. They minimized it. They made it a bigger deal initially. Everyone hated it, so they made it a thing. So they made it way less of a thing. And I think the reason why they're not taking it out is because what I mentioned about the healing over time.
It's funny, like Baldur's Gate 3 is a game you're playing right now, right? And that game changed a lot from early access. And the biggest change that I can think of is stuff like Firebolt and like Ray of Frost, right? Your basic cantrips, right? Mm-hmm. They used to leave surfaces. They used to like you if you cast Firebolt on the ground,
fire would appear.
It would create like a burning patch.
Okay.
And like a big burning patch. And the original version of that would do more damage than if you hit the person.
Oh shit. Okay.
So you'd aim at people's feet. And like the whole like meta for the first game was like use your cantrips to make a bunch of ice surfaces. And feedback came back that was like playing Divinity Original Sin 2 and just like playing Jenga with the floor like over and over and over and over is not what I want to do in a Dungeons and Dragons game. And they're like, okay.
Right.
And they just removed that whole fucking thing, which is crazy because that was their big deal in Divinity Original Sin 2. Well, now the surfaces and the interactions and stuff like that.
There's tons of spells that still ignite the floor. It's just
but it's not literally every single fucking one.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think of like, man, you know, in early access, when people go, I hate this, maybe you should think about it. I still remember the Darkest Dungeon 1 release day in which corpses got added to the game the day the game came out. And it was the most divisive, angry shit ever. People were so fucking mad. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and now, hours and hours and hours later, let me tell you, I love corpses.
So, yes, but here's the point I'm trying to make with that. I don't understand why you would have early access for a game to test feedback, only to have one of the largest mechanical changes you make to the situation, like to the game, not be able to be affected by feedback. That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
I mean, I think that it always should be affected by it, but if there's something that they're sticking with on their guns to, there might be other reasons. You know what I mean? And in this case, I feel like corpses are so crucial. Like, if you just said, no, fuck corpses, take them out, like, the way that they work now, or not even how not they work now, the way that I understand the game now, they're so essential that would have kind of actually fucked up.
No. I'm not saying this. They should have taken out corpses. I'm just like, the purpose of the early access is to get feedback and change things according to what people want, right?
Yeah.
And the corpse thing is a really funny example because they put this massive mechanical change right at the end, right?
Yeah.
The fucking stagecoach thing, like every single day of this game's life has been people going, I fucking hate this stagecoach shit. And the best they could do was the auto run on it.
Yeah. And I mean, the auto run really makes it not a big deal. Like, it's super... I don't know what else to say, except it's like, I felt like that fixed my problem with it. I'm satisfied with the auto run version of the coach as a solution, because my whole thing was, I don't play a turn-based game to have to actively do bad steering on a track, right? Mm-hmm. and so I don't want to do bad racing in my turn-based moment.
So for me, when I activated the auto run, what happened is that every now and then I would hit the little, the little pile of debris and get like an item here or an item there. The little things. And then I would horribly lose, right? Because I'm not good at Darkest Dungeon 2. And my brain would go, I fucking bet if I had the extra items from hitting every piece of trash in the street, I would have survived one more battle. And then that just loops back to me being pissed off about the fucking carriage section again.
No, you would not. That would not make
but it doesn't matter. That's how I feel in the moment.
Okay. That's not real, though. Like, that's super not real. It would not make the difference there, for sure. Yeah, I think what helps, I guess, in conclusion here is, let's say that you're in early access and you're making changes and people are giving you feedback on something, and you decide you're not going to change it. Maybe some transparency about why, because telling people what the point of something is, or maybe doing something to make it more clear in game why this is, like corpses, for example, have a ton of strategic use. And
no, I don't mind corpses personally. I'm just using them as an example.
Right, but within that same example, I would say if they took a response to everyone being, or not everyone, but some people being upset about corpses and that being a part of the discussion in early access, use that option to kind of like have a explanation why corpses are here and like why you're not going to change it necessarily. Because if you just look like you're like, we hear you, we don't care, then I believe
they did that. I believe they did actually explain at length in like a big old blog post, like, here's what the deal with this.
Then wonderful, because I figured out over time how incredibly useful they were and why they're a thing, So with the carriage, I'm just guessing that it's the overtime stuff. But yeah, I definitely feel that, and as far as my how annoyed I was with it, they fixed what I wanted out of the situation, which was just like, I don't want to actively play, like, swerve and care,
I have sat down with Darkest Dungeon since they added the controller support, and it's fine. And every time I get to the in-between fight and the carriage starts, I just go, sucks so bad. Like, it's overwhelming.
But I will say this, like, the game around this topic, that because we brought it up each time because I know it's the craw in your, it's the whatever the saying is, but I mean, it's at this point it's so minor, and everything else about that game is so fucking good.
It's not minor. It's like a fourth of your total time.
But the time spent in the coach or the item stuff? Because I feel like there's three things you could look at it, right? There's the part that bothered me, which is the steering, controlling, even having to bother pay attention to this. There's the time spent just traveling between locations. And then I guess there's the opportunity for the small little pickups you get versus missing them, right? When you take out the first one, I think the two ultimately are just like traveling to locations. That doesn't bother me. I don't mind the travel. I don't mind the little quips that pop up. The narrator says a line about the place you're about to arrive to, like, I don't mind seeing that location to location thing as a problem, because to me, the first game had a lot of walking in a straight line.
Yeah, I didn't like that either, to be honest. But at least that had like traps and shit that you had to deal with.
But there sometimes were traps. There's a lot of the times there weren't. Once you see the first one, you start thinking, oh shit, they're going to be there. But they're pretty infrequent, right? You would just walk to a curio, walk to a door, and then kind of walk to the next fight. Most of the time, I would say 80%, 85%, you're just holding forward, marching to the next thing.
This is where it kind of falls apart for me, because I'm like, if it's so nothing, then drop it. Like, Slay the Spire does not have a part where you fucking travel for fucking a full minute in between card game battles.
Yeah, you just click and you jump to the next one. I mean, I was playing whatchamacallit as well, Fights in Tight Spaces again. Like, you just click to the next one and go. I think, like, yeah, I think in the first game, the travel time, as someone was just pointing out there, like it's building tension is the intent there as well. But in both cases, it's like you could skip it entirely. I'm not gonna say like it needs to be there. I'm just like, as long as it doesn't bother, like it's not that big of a deal. Like I don't mind if the fight to fight time has that 20-second, like, I don't know.
Like I really feel like I want to go watch like a video of somebody going through like, a full stage. Like I feel like it is like 1/5, 1/4 of the total time spent is just you sitting there watching it go.
It's not. That's lie. That's not true. That's far from the truth. I'm sorry. It's
really?
Yeah, it is. You spend about 10 seconds going from one coach location to another.
That is not. You do not spend 10 seconds. You spend way longer.
You spend. I'm honestly, dude. Honestly, it's seconds, and then when you get into the fights to me last a while, right? I feel like I'm gonna say,
no offense, Woolie. I don't mean to be rude, but yes, fights for you in games last a while.
Okay, well, they're still going to take up most of your time in this. I don't think, no matter who you are. Like, I think
most, but I'm talking like 25, 75%.
I would say like 20 seconds tops, maybe 15 seconds traveling in the cart, and then a given fight is like it feels dumb to get into the nitty-gritty of like how long the fight time is versus the seconds of.
That's really important. It's the same reason like when we play Street Fighter, like time from the main menu to like getting into a fight is like important. Time take Guilty Gear. Remember how long it takes to get into a match of Guilty Gear?
The fights themselves, you'll sometimes you go to like round 6 or something, and you get round 7, an interminable conflict, and it's like, this fight has been going on for a couple minutes now. You know what I mean? Like I feel like the fastest fights are gonna be like a minute, maybe a minute and a half. But the reason why I guess I'm having a hard time breaking this down any further to me is because the things that like bother me, once they're not there, my experience with everything becomes smoother. So I can't anticipate how much that time is going to necessarily be a factor to how negative you see this, but to me the control being gone is the major part of it. So the 15 seconds, I like it's just not that.
So I'm watching it, I'm skimming through somebody's like run now, and I'm watching like fights taking 1 minute, and then like the entire traversal of one branch taking also 1 minute. So it's actually way higher than I described.
Is it actually a minute, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I guess I'm wrong. I don't know. I
410.
I've played a whole lot of that, and I feel like
20. 410 to 530. Yeah, just go. Like, it's tons of time on the fucking carriage.
Okay. I'm not trying to like. I'm not gonna. It's almost like in the MK sense. I'm like, I'm not gonna say it's like it's a good thing. I'm gonna defend it. It needs to be there, and the card is great. It's like I'm just like, I'm glad that they made it way less worse to the point where I'm enjoying the game significantly more because of what's been done. But they could remove it more, I suppose. But the amount that's there is not to the detriment of my enjoyment of a really good game. That's where.
Oh no, obviously not to your enjoyment.
I can't argue on behalf of Red Hook. Like why not change it more or whatever. I don't know what to tell you except like
I feel. Is this going to make any sense? I feel frustrated by my own line of thinking because if I ran into Red Hook, I don't know how I would actually ask the question, because the question is, hey, this part of the game really sucks. Why didn't you take it out?
See, and I think that with each of these games, kind of similar to how we just touched on Bomb Rush, there's a point where it's like, there's a lot of cool stuff here. Here's a part that is the weakest part of the game. That sucks. I wish that would be fixed, or I wish they would change that, or perhaps take it out entirely, right? Now, how much does that weakest part of the game ultimately stop you from enjoying it, and how much does it get in your way from continuing to play it? Or if you retroactively are looking back at it, like how much would it knock off your score if you were doing a review? Like, I can understand when there's a core element that like fucks the whole thing up for you. I can't think of any for myself like this. Where
is there any game that like you would otherwise like adore, but there's that one fucking thing that just makes you go nuts?
I can't think of anything really. I can think of like how I've brought up many times, and people have definitely went like, oh god, it's we're going back here again. But with World of Warcraft, god damn it, Warcraft 3. I remember just being overwhelmed.
That happen every time.
Because World of Warcraft is now, the word world comes before it because it's been 20 years of it, right? It's just what it is. I've never played Warcraft 1 and 2 as a kid growing up. I only got into StarCraft.
So painful.
I only got introduced to Warcraft via friends talking about it and stuff, so it was a background piece of thing in my brain. And then World of Warcraft took over the whole world, so that has become more associated together. And the Warcraft 3, which I did try to play at the beginning, I ran into the problem where I couldn't, so that's what it is.
You're not wrong, but it hurts.
Warcraft 3 overwhelmed me with its hero system in addition to the normal like method of play. And if I were a better RTS player, I suppose I could have handled it, but I couldn't, and it turned me off of the game.
You're right. Woolie, here's the thing. You're completely right. And I think history proved everyone who felt that way correctly, because games like RTS stopped having super complicated hero units. They just took those complicated hero units and made them the only character you fucking control. If it's the only character you control at all, sure, I can.
No problem.
I can hit W. I can hit E.
But I think that's the closest thing I can think of to like the fatal flaw where I would otherwise like it type of thing. I don't there's a lot of cases where I'll see that thing and I'll be like, damn, that's pretty annoying, but I'm still in for the ride. I still want to enjoy the rest of it, and by the end it'll be like, yeah, well, there was that bad part of it. That was dumb. I hate that they did that, but I can still enjoy the rest,
I feel like this speaks to a larger part of my personality, because I'm trying to, you're trying to make this a weird allegory. So like, I'll think of a food analogy, right? Everybody knows what food is, right? And I'm like, I have discovered the food analogy for this specific thing. Bomb Rush Cyberpunk's floaty controls and the carriage in Darkest Dungeon 2 is a pickle on your hamburger. To which someone says, like, just take the pickle off. It's like, it still reeks of pickle. It's ruined. It's ruined now. Like, a burger with a pickle on it is ruined. It's the saddest fucking thing in the world.
I understand that a pickle juice flavor will linger. I don't think these features are that bad for most people.
No, actually the lingering pickle juice doesn't work into the analogy. But like, can I please have my Darkest Dungeon 2 without pickles? No, the chef says it must have pickles. They just made the pickles smaller. But I don't like pickles.
Then I guess the game's not for you.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah.
I feel like this happens to me like every single day.
It happens to
like
you
every single day. There's a pickle on something.
You are the common denominator of all these pickles. You are, in fact, the thread that continues to link.
I asked
each
for
of
no
these
pickles.
There are many moments in life where we get something that is enjoyable, but there will be flaws in it because the people who make them are not us. There's many other people who
Oh no, hold on.
I
want to stop you right there. If I made something, it would be terrible. The only good thing I made is my adorable little person.
No. I'm not going there. That's not where I'm going with it. I'm just going to the point where, like, even the creator that knows how to make shit I love is probably going to be super into most of that what I enjoy, but will probably hate, but will like something that I'm not going to enjoy for even a little bit. I love the fuck out of Bayonetta, but holy shit, Kamiya loves those shooter shmups. Kamiya loves the fuck out of those shmups, and I like a good shmup. Who doesn't, right? But how much do you love shmups, bro?
You know what? That's a perfect example, because like those stages are like a half pickle in that But I won't replay Bayo 1 because I don't want the Gen fight to be like every time you fight Gen in that game, the good fight, your thumbs hurt like shit from mashing through that afterburner thing.
Right. So a good shmup send up is always like, I enjoy them, especially when you see them switching between, in Paris, where you switch between like R type shmups and then you go top view for a Raiden style shmup. Like, I love that. I that's great. But the overstaying of the welcome and the like, yo, you're really gonna enjoy Ace Combat for the next 5 minutes or plus is like a huge part of that, right?
Oh man.
Now as we look at those as examples of somebody who knows how to make a fucking game that you're down with 90% of the ride, you get to that part where they're like, and you're down with this, right? But if you're not, you're like, ah. But for me, I guess I'm just like, that's not going to stop me from ever going back to that game, right? Similarly to if you hated Punch-Out but you played Wonderful 101, like that would be a slog, but it's not going to stop me from enjoying the rest of the game. So that's how most of the time I encounter these things, because I know that it's not going to be
somebody in the chat pointed out the Owlcat games, the Pathfinder Kingmaker and Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, which are superficially similar to Baldur's Gate. They're, CRPGs. They will stop you every now and then and be like, hey, do you want to play a really bad half-baked city builder or crusade management sim? And you go, I really don't want to. And they're like, too bad. It's like a third of the game. It's terrible. Terrible.
I remember, for a while. I mean, I don't think as much anymore, but like back in the day when James Small was like, he had his things where he's like, if this game has unskippable cutscenes, fuck this game. If this game has QTEs, fuck this game. Like, don't waste my time.
That was like the most ridiculous. Yeah. I remember asking him, like, well, how are you going to know what happens in the story? And he's like, if the story is in unskippable, if the story is in cutscenes I can skip, then it's not worth seeing.
Because his experience was essentially like looking for arcade fun in video games. And like once I kind of understood that part of it, I was like, right, okay, we're looking for that type of enjoyment out of our sitting down to play the game experience, So, but anyways, I just, the things I love, right? The games that are my favorite, all of them, there's always a part or an aspect or a thing that is just, what the fuck? Why would you do it this way? And I don't think those ever stopped me from still really loving it,
Makes me bummed out, man. Like these are two games that I would otherwise probably like, if not for the one thing. Sucks. Like I use the burger analogy. I would rather eat nothing and throw food away than eat it with pickles on it. Like, you remember, like, as a child, like, you overheard somebody going, well, if they're hungry enough, they'll eat it.
Mm-hmm.
No, starve.
Mm-hmm. I think there's stuff too where I like when I can see how it's because this is also a sequel, right? Like you can see how they took an aspect and like tried to turn it into a funner version of what it used to be.
Yeah.
So, because we're focusing so hard on this one thing that anyone who listens to this podcast is going to think that this game is half racing game, half fucking dark battle RPG battles, or whatever. And it's like, it's really not. But
that's what it feels like
because of how much time we spent micro focusing on the thing. But in Darkest Dungeon 1, for example, something that I remember I enjoyed initially was like the Hamlet and building it up. But there's a point you hit once you've mostly maxed out your Hamlet stuff where it just kind of it becomes pretty rote and not there's not much to do. You're just like, okay, now once I've unlocked all the buildings and I have all my places to do stuff. All I'm doing is dragging people into their stress management places. You go to the cloister, you go to the bar, and then you just, whatever. It's just background nonsense, right? And when they got rid of that, because this is the whole carriage based thing, you go to different inns now, and then all that stress management stuff is
it happens there instead. Yeah,
it happens there instead, and that's also fusing the campfire from the middle of Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah, the campfire is the town now, basically.
They fused them together. Exactly. So I'm like, oh, what a great idea, where you took part of this and part of that, but here's the monotonous part of this and here's the monotonous part of that, and you kind of put them together in one thing that makes sense. And when you're doing it at the inn now, each time I'm going through the inn, even though I'm used to it at this point, I'm still like, no, but I'm like, oh, let's shop, let's think about my build. Where's my stress at? Okay, you've got too much stress, but your blight resistance is low. Let me see if and you do a little bit of you do more thinking in a way that improves this massive step from what used to be there to something here that's worth praising.
I'm starting to understand something about the way you're describing this and the way that you're doing fights and the way that you're managing your thing. So you know how I can get decision paralysis? If there's too many options, I go, Yeah, for whatever reason, I didn't have that with Darkest Dungeon 2 because I would go in and the inn would take 60 seconds.
Ooh,
and
interesting.
The fights would be over one way or the other.
Huh, okay.
In 90 seconds.
Yeah.
Because if I have to sit there and think too much, I'll actually just make no decision.
Okay.
So I just roll with it.
Yeah. I don't know. When the narrator says stop and consider your options when you click to move on, and you go what are my upcoming rooms? I go backwards. I go, what are the rooms I have to pick? What are the routes? And if it's the sluice, I'm like, all right, we're doing the sluice. What does that mean? Let's go back and look at my build.
I don't know. It means I'm going to pick left or right.
Yeah. No, I spend a little bit more than that planning out each stage before I go in, because especially there'll be times when, and this is, again, how it all works together really well, you'll get mastery points from the previous level, which means you can now take an ability of one of your characters and make it a really good one. You can, max out that ability. And because that ability gets so good, you can actually rearrange the synergy of your four around one really good ability. So now you're gonna rearrange that synergy, and that'll lead to you thinking about how you should build up your speed and resistances.
I'm thinking my thought process might be completely incompatible with this game because everything you're talking about is the stuff that is in the way of doing the part of the game that's fun, which is fighting the battles.
Interesting. I'm having fun with the plan because when I put my highwayman second and I have my berserker first, right? Boudica is there, and then I have it set up so that if the highwayman gets a chance to act before, he will do his duelist advanced, which pushes him forward. He'll get to the front of the line and have a counter ready to go, right? But when I got the ability to do massive damage off of his point blank shot, which is a thing that he does from the front line, it pushes him back, I switched their lines around and put him in a different rank and put his speed up. And because I put his speed up, everyone else, I made sure that they could support him as the point of the party instead of the way I was playing before I had that mastery point, And that's going from one level into another, how you can optimize. And the thing with this is, by doing what I'm describing, you make the really, really hard game that kills you all the time more manageable, right?
I gotta be honest, I kind of don't know what you're talking about because I'm thinking back to my time with that game, and I'm like, my plan was to get into the fights and do better than I did the last time by making better choices in the fight.
Right. Now, the process of doing better choices means the way they killed you beforehand, you got to kind of think about that and do things to stop that from happening again.
Yeah, so pick better shoot in the fight.
And but the way you do that, of course, is better shoot in the fight. But if you find yourself like in a moment where, I can't attack this character that's doing tons of damage to me because he's all in the back and he's hidden, I better make sure that my character can reveal hidden characters. Otherwise, I'm just going to die again. Right? So shooting good means, and shooting better second time means, let me turn on that ability to reveal hidden characters that I didn't have last time because I know that this type of enemy is going to show up here. Right? So it's learning from the loss and then trying to play a bit better the next time. And that's how the really, really hard game starts to get a little bit more manageable. But it's still brutal. But like thinking about it a little bit more is part of the fun. And then like taking on the bosses, especially where, you have to beat a boss in order to make it to the mountain. Like all of that, you really have to think about your rows, and you really have to think about your resistance.
No, I don't want to. I just want to do it better. I want to Dante more button gooder.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. You know what? This might not. Yeah, Darkest Dungeon 2 may not be for me. Because it sounds like you're describing labbing.
Now, for what it's worth, I only discovered that like through the trial and error, of playing it a bunch. I butt my head into some enemies and kind of was like, I don't know what I'm doing here, and I don't know how to beat this, or I don't know what I'm just picking an ability and hoping it's going to do enough damage randomly. And then when I unlocked a pathway that had a thing that said like, hey, when you switch to this type of pathway with this character, these moves get better and these ones get worse. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? And I go to look at the moves and how they got better. And it's like, oh, you want me to primarily now, when I switch to this mode, use this character to do a different thing from the way they were initially set up. So the game is kind of implying how you should change your approach a little bit. So like, until I was kind of looking at that, I was just kind of like going, all right, let's see what happens, But it rewards the tactical aspect of your approach. It really does. And I don't know. I find that fucking awesome. I really love it. Making a plan is very satisfying when it manages to come together. And it's really satisfying when it...
Is that what you're describing, making a plan?
And when it barely comes together and you just happen to scrape by, then you're like, oh, fuck, So then you
okay. So
you get to the next fight, and then where they're like, hey, do we charge in or do we run away? And I'm like, man, I'm bleeding out. I'm stressed out. I need a little more time for everyone to calm down and heal up. Fuck this fight. I'll take the damage to my heat, to my my light,
Yeah.
And the stress.
This makes a lot more sense because everything about the planning of this game is miserable. And I'm like, I would like it to be over as fast as possible so I can get to the good part. This is explaining a lot,
strong word, but
as to why I am spending such a disproportionate amount of time in the carriage, because I'm spending 0 time in any of the planning phases. Yeah, I don't... Like this reminds me of when I was playing Slay the Spire and people were telling me sometimes you need to skip cards, a concept I still don't understand to this day, because they give you cards. Why would I skip the cards? That means I'm getting weaker by not getting anything.
No, you're getting weaker by getting too many cards because the chances of drawing a weak card
So I
are
should just
higher.
Play the whole thing with the same cards I started with?
Because the concept of a limited deck of cards means you have a higher chance of pulling the thing out. Right? And the thing that you're pulling out is going to be harder to get to if you want it, if there's more fluff in the way. Smaller deck means you can get it more likely because it's odds. It's just
so
math.
I should just pick up no cards then?
No, you should pick up the ones that you think are a good balance. But
I do. Every card card looks like the good card because it does a thing.
I can't fucking like literally math. Like I
You know what? I saw somebody make someone make the comparison to a trading card game with Darkest Dungeon. Like if I had a button that I could hit that was like get the build from trading card game thing into Darkest Dungeon so I can just focus on doing the battles, I would click that in an instant.
Look,
Like,
man, I realize something, and I'm very clear about this. I'm like, as much as I sometimes have rhetoric ability, there's a lot of the times I don't, and I'm not good at getting a point across or explaining or whatever, right? So the fact that this is transferring a game that's really good outside of my own I like to lab bullshit into turning it into that is, I feel like a shitty thing and disingenuous for what this game is. Like, it's not me liking to lab that's the best part about this game.
What I'm I'm not saying that it's that. I'm saying it's that I hate
sort
it.
of a I get that. I'm saying, like, there's some popping up there of like it's Woolie liking labbing, and I'm like, it's so much not that. It's
no,
so
actually,
much better
it's
than that.
like, what I'm saying is, if I could next deck Darkest Dungeon, I would do so instantly, and that game would be so great. Like, once it reminds me when I was playing Runeterra and when I was playing Marvel Snap. Once I started to build decks, is when I stopped playing those games.
Like, I couldn't. Instead, like when we were last talking about like Starfield, like, I couldn't get to the point where I wanted to just say that, like, I'm looking at not the core of how the loops of these RPGs go, but just the literal writing and events of the story and the beats. And like, the fact that I can't get to that point and bring it up and we go 20 minutes into the conversation is just like, I wish I was better at that. I really wish I could like stick to, you know, what's a more clear thing, because at this point all I'm left to say is like, this is a thing that I find fun about this. If you like these things, you might find it fun too. But if you don't like these things, it doesn't mean this game is not for you, because you might still enjoy it without the thing that I'm doing. I'm just taking an approach to it that, like,
I'm just
is leaning into what I find fun, you know?
I'm obsessed with figuring out why I don't like something. Okay. Because if I don't like something, I have to have a good reason.
Mm-hmm. What games do you like strategizing in? Tactics?
Nothing.
Okay.
Strategizing sucks. Just do it. Like, when I played StarCraft, I would just build as many carriers as I could for the mission type and just rush it.
In Armored Core 6, when you switch your build up, would you consider that strategizing if it's failing?
No. Also, when I fought Balteus, I actually should have switched my build up, but instead I just fought him 40 more times and then learned how to do it gooder.
But how can you play a game like Tactics without thinking
Final Fantasy Tactics?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
you have to think about the placement and setup of enemies and how to.
Well, yeah, but that's, I guess Final Fantasy Tactics. I guess tactics games.
Right, and to some degree, Front Mission carries a lot of that too, right? Where you're on that grid and you've got to position and, you know, anticipate a little bit.
I suppose, yeah.
Okay.
But for Front Mission 3, what I did was I looked up all the parts that gave you what skills and then picked the skills that I wanted from that, instead of building my robot and seeing what skills I got and then building the robot further along those skills.
Well, I guess all I can say then is just, because we got to move on, right? But like, you know how you decide to, instead of do what the game like presents you with in Baldur's Gate, you're like, let me sneak over this wall, let me go underneath this thing and steal all the TNT, and then make this guy think he's got the bomb to ignite it, but he doesn't. And
right.
Like, you do all these little fun steps to like,
absolutely
have it pay off. It's just that. It's just that again. It's just finding a different thing to.
Is it? Because I feel like one is like planning, and then the same thing you were going to do anyway. Whereas in Baldur's Gate, it's I'm going to do something different.
Well, Baldur's Gate is an exceptionally good game at having tons of options to do things out of the box. In this case, other video games are not Baldur's Gate 3, certainly. But the planning, and or at the very least, it's not even planning as much as it is like thinking about your moves and how you're going to approach, you know? It like when I mean, to go into Souls, like swinging that big greatsword around and then eventually learning, oh, wait, anticipate them coming beforehand so you hit them, you know, at the tip, right?
Right.
Or turn around after you don't lock on to do an unlocked on swing. Those little things that like get you better at those bits. It just feels like another version of that, except in this case it's like I put my move that works well, move A for character A works well with move B for character B, and I click these two together, and now I can use that for this thing.
I feel like Baldur's Gate, I have like my planning is like a single step, which is I wonder if I could do this. Whereas like when I was in the stagecoach, not the stage, when I was at the inn for Darkest Dungeon, I'm like, it's look at the stage you're going to go into, and then trying to remember what kinds of things that it's going to have, and then see what kind of items I could buy to prep myself, and all this micromanagement that I'm just like,
I mean, for what it's worth, the equivalent of net decking in Darkest Dungeon is you can just jump on the wiki and look at some, suggestions.
Yeah. So unfortunately, you're completely right. But like when I net decked, my criteria was, can I hit a button that just imports the deck entirely without me even having to look at it? Like when I would like, oh, hey, I'm playing Runeterra and I'm net decking, I was using an app to import the deck, and then I would play the deck. I wouldn't look at it. Like, because that's a waste of time. I would learn the deck by playing it.
Well, again, it's a bummer that it hits you in a way that is sometimes an impassable hurdle. I think for most people, the concept of letting a plan pay off in the game usually is not a bad thing. Like, it's usually enjoyable. If there's an aspect of the game where you can not plan and just kind of impromptu figure it out, a good game will allow you to approach things in a variety of ways, so that people that are more impulsive and people that are more, strategic can both enjoy the game. But like, I would say that like if a game kind of presents itself as about a certain thing and then like rewards you for going into that way of thinking, then I genuinely like that, I didn't know that about myself, and this is part of how, when I've been playing all these new games that are outside of my comfort levels, discovering that the game has a rule set and it wants you to follow it, and then it forces you to adjust what you like into what it's asking you to do. I kind of was like, ooh, okay, I trust your guidance here, right? When I go into, to use Souls again, you can't just swing at everything aggressively.
Yeah, you need to meet it on its own terms.
But the most recent example of that being Silent Hill 2, right, and Silent Hill 1 are like, no. You are going to play this at the pace we are dictating. If you try to break that, you're going to struggle. And that breather it forces you to take was one where I'm like, okay, then show me what's next, because I'm not used to what you're showing me. And if it works out, then I'm like, oh, this is cool. You had a plan for this. And I like getting out of my comfort zone, even if it's going to be a pathway that makes sense,
Yeah, there was actually a hard drive article about this, now that I think about it, where it's game teaches gamer new mechanic that he will then ignore. I saw somebody say like about investing mental energy, and it's like, yeah, no, I get to a point in something like Darkest Dungeon, and it goes, okay, now it's time to manage your items, and my brain goes, yeah, I don't want to do that. And if it leads to me losing, then I will just stop playing rather than engage in this.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, like I'm willing to confront something a little bit like outside of my comfort zone and then try to see where it goes. If I recognize it for something that I genuinely always find not that interesting. Okay, here's a good example. Crafting. I almost always hate crafting.
Oh, dude, Baldur's Gate 3, I have not crafted one item.
And if the game is like, yeah, but now it's mandatory, right? Then that would be
time to stop.
Right, that would be really bad. But as
time to just stop.
But as someone who hates crafting, in most games I've played, I've been fine ignoring it, And
remember how Elden Ring had crafting?
No.
I know, right?
And so for people that love crafting, it's there certainly, but like when a game has crafting, like if I'm not going to say fuck this game because it has crafting, I'm not playing it. Because I think that's the point where everyone goes, Woolie, you fucking asshole, are you insane? The game's great. Just don't craft.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, so I just don't craft, you know?